When a leader asks, "What if?" it signals permission to explore new models, new systems, and new ways of creating value, and it encourages possibilities that might otherwise remain unseen. Creative leaders foster psychological permission for everyone to think creatively, regardless of their title, function, or hierarchy, so that imagination becomes part of everyday work rather than an occasional event at an offsite. I'm excited to have you join me today as I talk about creative leadership. Creativity is a shared skill, and those that succeed in innovation embrace this in their culture, in their systems, and in their business. Building that kind of culture requires more than structure or intent. It demands consistency and even unlearning. When companies can't create real innovation, they end up stuck in a loop of small tweaks and safe bets, losing their competitive edge and inhibiting growth. Employees may struggle under the weight of inherited assumptions and outdated practices that quietly restrict new thinking. Entrenched biases and fear of disruption can create an environment where innovation just slows to a crawl. Achieving creative velocity, that is, the ability to generate new and useful ideas quickly and consistently, requires that leaders model behaviors that encourage employees to question conventions, test unproven ideas, and even share early thinking before it's fully formed. True creative leadership supports curiosity and learning by inviting challenge rather than rewarding compliance. It empowers people at every level to confront the status quo, question expert thinking, and test assumptions that have gone unchallenged for far too long. When leaders encourage this kind of intellectual bravery, the organization begins to move differently. Ideas flow more freely across boundaries. Collaboration deepens, and asking "what if" replaces inventing excuses. The real test of creative leadership is not how well it protects existing systems, but how openly and consistently it invites better ones to emerge. Sometimes leaders will create what I call a creative distortion field that produces an environment where individuals or organizations claim to embrace change or innovation while avoiding the fundamental challenges that creative disruptive solutions will bring. This spin misleads employees, board members, and shareholders into believing that designating a specific group of employees as the innovation engine will bring the focus necessary for true transformation. I worked at two companies, T-Mobile and Best Buy, that stood up standalone innovation labs and segregated employees who were tasked with developing patents and delivering ideas. While the goal may be to protect experimentation from the bureaucracy of the core business, usually at some point the idea needs the enterprise's support to scale. The presence of the lab signals modernity and ambition, even if it produces little strategic impact. This performative function satisfies the optics of innovation with its beanbags, post-its, and hackathons without confronting the structural barriers that drove the segregation in the first place. Labs tend to be filled with the company's self-identified creatives, designers, or futurists. While these people may be brilliant, their very separation signals that innovation is a specialist function, not a shared responsibility. The rest of the company sees innovation as their job, not mine. And that mentality is fatal to creative velocity because the best disruptive ideas often come from unexpected places, such as finance, operations, customer service, and logistics, where real constraints are visible. Ultimately, the core business kills what the lab creates, not out of malice, but because their exclusion from the invention process meets systematic limitations or vulnerabilities the business isn't prepared to address. When I was at T-Mobile, the company created a separate innovation lab away from its main campus. From this IDEO design studio, the T-Mobile Cameo digital picture frame emerged around 2008, separate from the company's main product and systems teams. On paper, it was clever. a cellular connected digital photo frame that allowed users to send pictures to it via multimedia messaging or email. It addressed a real consumer pain point at the time, which was that Wi-Fi only photo frames were hard for non-technical users to update. But the Cameo fell victim to the structural disconnect between the lab's freedom to imagine and the core organization's inability to operationalize what it had imagined. The failure was not in the idea itself. It was that T-Mobile's business systems and go-to-market realities provided no way to support it. Because the lab was separated from day-to-day operations, the employees didn't realize that the company's billing and CRM systems could not support a data-only device without a paired voice line. T-Mobile's core business was built around subsidized phones on voice plans. The Cameo just didn't fit that model. It required a new billing category, which was a monumental effort for an unproven product. The product was effectively orphaned the moment it needed to cross the boundary from invention to execution. It is also not unusual for cultural values to be crafted in such a way that they undermine creative thinking. For example, saying we are committed to continuous improvement may be intended to excite employees not to rest on past success. It also implies incremental iteration on the existing model rather than genuine reinvention. It keeps thinking within current boundaries. When you say we make data-driven decisions, you may subtly encourage teams to avoid any novel opportunities that are not supported by existing analytics or predicted by past performance. That said, a company that celebrates data-driven decision-making can also manage to pioneer ideas when that tenet exists in the context of other key elements of the culture. I learned this at Amazon, where a key leadership principle is to invent and simplify. This principle states that leaders expect and require innovation and invention from their teams and always find ways to simplify. They are externally aware, look for new ideas from everywhere, and are not limited by not invented here. As we do new things, we accept that we may be misunderstood for long periods of time. Amazon's internal philosophy actually operates on two complementary gears. One is data-driven optimization, and the other is judgment-based invention. Bezos repeatedly warned against what he called the tyranny of data. He discouraged the tendency to demand proof before imagination. His view was that data can only tell you about the past, while invention requires projection and intuition. In one of his famous shareholder letters, he wrote, "The thing I've noticed is when you have to make a choice between data and instinct, data often wins for good reason, but that's not always right. You need to use your heart and intuition." Team unity is another example of a cultural value that can make it difficult for employees to feel secure when pointing out risks in plans or suggesting there may be vulnerabilities in key assumptions. If the tenet is written something like, "We work together as one team," it suggests that consensus is highly valued, which can make employees hesitant to appear unsupportive of a colleague's idea. One leadership principle that was challenging for me to internalize when I came to Amazon was have backbone, disagree, and commit. This was a hard pivot because I came from a consensus-driven culture that was born from Best Buy's Minnesota Nice roots. Rather than pursuing consensus, Amazon leaders are taught to disagree and commit. This mechanism legitimizes dissent because if you disagree with an assumption or plan, you are expected to voice strong opposition, be heard, and then still align once a decision is made. The culture prizes clear argumentation over comfort. In effect, disagreement is proceduralized into innovation. Creative leaders are not focused on positioning themselves as the expert with all the answers, and instead, they should ask generative questions and remain genuinely curious about perspectives different from their own. They look to others to help make their ideas more robust and are willing to evolve their point of view with new information. I once had a manager early in my tech career who would say, "Don't bring me problems without solutions." It would make me so frustrated. I tell him that if I had solutions, they wouldn't be problems. He replied by saying that he wanted to see what effort I had put into trying to solve it, what solutions I had considered, and why I had decided to dismiss those solutions. He knew I was closer to the problem and might have insights that he would know to include in any solution that he proposed. I realized in that moment that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about cultivating the conditions for better questions. Creative leaders actively work to identify and challenge the biases that limit open exploration, knowing that true innovation requires disrupting his habitual patterns of thought. They have to encourage their teams to bring half-baked ideas out into the open so others can polish the recipe, because creativity rarely emerges fully formed. When ideas are shared early, even in rough shape, they become raw material for collective invention. When I was writing the proposal for my book, Creative Velocity, I openly shared it with a variety of people: university professors, ex-colleagues from different job functions, and executives whom I respect, to see if anyone would even care to read it. I knew that if no one thought it was interesting, I would be okay not writing the book. And I intentionally avoided sharing it with those people I believed would give me the answers they thought I wanted to hear. The project had to earn its existence. I was looking for tough love and feedback that would broaden my thinking. I learned the value of this approach at Amazon. Before a product idea moves forward, teams begin by writing a mock press release that announces the finished product as if it already exists. Stakeholders and executives discuss the proposition, in particular its credibility and viability, and they scrutinize the assumptions, especially those around its ROI. This approach improves the final product by ensuring that creative ideas are both visionary and grounded in feasibility. They probe to ensure teams deliver meaningful customer and business value. They question the beliefs that exist in the absence of data. By the time the concept moves forward, it's already been through multiple cycles of critical questioning, customer empathy, and narrative refinement. Every person who took the time to read my proposal and provide feedback truly improved it with their questions and comments. By the time I was ready to share the proposal with an editor, it was tight and comprehensive, and Wiley greenlighted the project in less than a week. In cultures where creativity is valued, leaders don't use authority to dictate solutions, and creativity isn't confined to any single discipline. In fact, creative leaders excel at recognizing that breakthroughs often occur when perspectives collide. A new product or service may require a new business model or contractual framework, different partners or suppliers, changes to the billing system, or a novel sales approach. When a leader asks, "What if?" it signals permission to explore new models, new systems, and new ways of creating value, and it encourages possibilities that might otherwise remain unseen. Creative leaders foster psychological permission for everyone to think creatively, regardless of their title, function, or hierarchy, so that imagination becomes part of everyday work rather than an occasional event at an offsite. Most importantly, creative leaders don't claim they have all the answers, so they model curiosity. In such cultures, creativity shifts from being an individual act of inspiration to a collective habit of asking better questions. They make it safe for people to share rough ideas, push back on the status quo, and help figure out what's next. Over time, that approach spreads. The team stops asking, "How have we always done this?" and starts asking, "What if we tried something different?" Thanks for joining me today.